Two things before we actually get started. No presentation ever goes off well without some organization behind it. And I actually want to thank the young lady beside me here for getting the presentation up, but also to both the Catherines, to Mike Ryan, to Phil, to Ken, all of the logistics that go behind one of these events. This doesn't just happen. And Ken is very right. Schools around the nation don't have these sort of programs. They may give you all the academics, which may be fantastic, but they don't give this kind of practical, tactical advice. So it's due to their foresight and also all of the coordination. So thank you to the team for organizing this. The second point before I get started is somewhat of a caveat. I don't want my accent to put you off. When I was a lot younger, I used to say that I had spent half my life in England and half in America. I have spent way more than half in America. I came when I was a young student to America, and I've loved it every day since. I'm an American citizen, and I've raised 3 children to be American, and I love this country, but I'm sorry for my accent, so I am an American. Don't think of that negatively. So the reason I'm here today is exactly as Ken said. We're really looking at what will help each one of you be a total success in your career. Not just the academics, which, by the way, obviously, you're at a top-notch school. I am certain that Business Week is going to have you coming out in a fantastic level. You are going to be ranked very highly. But there are a lot of other students in this nation. There are a lot of other students in MBA programs. What is going to distinguish you individually to be a greater success than any other student that's out there? That's why I'm here today. So we'll get started. The visual that you see behind you is actually, I think, rather clever in that even if you don't golf, you've played a sport or you've watched sports, I'm sure, and you can see from this visual that one of two things is going to happen. There's either going to be a smashing shot or something's going to happen to that gentleman on the ground, right? And he's going to somewhat lose face, no pun intended. What's important to all of you is you don't get a second chance. In golf, there's an expression, a mulligan. You can take a second chance. You can take a second shot. You won't get that second shot. If you blow it, you blow it. I'm here to see that everything you do can be the right thing, layered on top of your great degree from a great college, you graduate with a great MBA, and that you're fully loaded to be successful. That is the reason for us being here. A few points about a session overview in terms of what we're actually going to expect today. It's about some performance excellence ideas, and some of those performance excellence points are about what it actually takes each of you to succeed. One of them is in terms of leadership. I am going to be discussing today the leadership 5 C's. These help you not only in business development, but in absolutely everything you do, regardless of the profession you go into, no matter what the technical background you have, no matter what your degree. Secondly, none of you are going to graduate and none of you are going to have the time to say, you know what, I have no emails today, I have nothing to do today. I think that I'll figure out some way to help my own career. You are going to be so full of activities once you graduate, just like you are today. You're going to need to have things that you can incorporate into your day-to-day work, your day-to-day activities. There's no executive and no professional says, I think I need to take time out to now do something professionally. And importantly, you will need to network. There are very few jobs you're ever going to have, very few career opportunities where not knowing someone in the right place is going to help you. But networking isn't about chit-chatting. Networking isn't about having the best personality or having the funniest joke. In fact, all of that can be detrimental and negative. I'm going to inculcate today what I think can really help you in a concrete and professional manner build a network that could help you be successful. And last but not least, I'm going to talk about approaches, and unfortunately we won't have enough time to talk about long-term approaches. I'm going to talk about some very tactical, practical things that you can do in the very next job application email you send, the very next email you can send to a potential employer, the very next interview you have, the very next phone call you have, and the very next meeting you have, as well as some thoughts that I hope will carry you through your career. One of the best things that I had said to me recently, actually, was from a client that I had delivered a program for over a decade ago. I used to head global business development for KPMG, and I founded a business development consulting firm 15 years ago. And one of the executives from a global company said to me, Hilary, I still have on the back of my door your 5 C's, and when I'm going into a global board meeting, I still look at those. I hope that you think of this a decade from now, and you'll think of some of the things that I shared with you today and that they're helpful. In terms of what will last with you, I'm a big believer in things that have been around for millennials. New fangled things may or may not work. Technology enables us to leverage human nature that has always worked. And in terms of this presentation today, I admonish you to think about what Confucius said. He said, just tell me and I'll forget. So you might forget a lot of things that you hear today, but if you see things, you may remember them, because for some reason we inculcate things that we see visually. So I have a lot of visuals, a lot of photographs that I hope will make you remember some of the things today. Last but not least, he said, involve me and I'll understand. I'll give you a caveat right now. I don't think there's anything I'm going to share with you today that you're going to say, goodness, that's rocket science. And if I hadn't heard that from Hilary, I would never have known. There may be things you've read before. You might have even heard these in some of your classes. But I guarantee this, if you involve yourself, think about the job you've already had. Most of you being MBA students have already been in the business world. Think about the position you've had. Think about jobs you had when you were interning somewhere. Think about your professors. Think about your classes. Think about how the principles apply to your daily life. I can't sit in your shoes, and I'm not the same as all of you. Everybody in this room is absolutely different. But if you can involve yourself in the presentation, not just what I'm saying, but think about what I'm saying and involve that in your life, your interviews, your job prospects, your classes, and your future, I think it'll be a lot more powerful. So going back to what Ken mentioned, he said, we're talking here today, and I believe you have a very good program. I've seen your agenda, a lot of practical tips from some other global leaders and many global companies. You're going to hear about what it takes to be a success, many different aspects of your career. And this is why I'm here today. It's a statistic that's from the Carnegie Institute of Technology. That statistic is about the percentage of your success that is based purely and only on your technical expertise. That would be your technical degree. We have some accounting majors here. We have many of you that have a technical background, different majors, different subjects. What percentage would you want to hazard a guess of any lawyer? Because there's plenty of lawyers out there. There are plenty of surgeons out there. They all went to great medical schools, plenty of great lawyers, great accountants, great consultants. They all went to good schools and they all have great degrees. What percentage would anybody like to guess is based purely and only on your technical competence? What percentage? Anybody like to hazard a guess? 20%, 20%. That's actually a very good guess, and actually that's very close. Who said that? Was there somebody over at this table here? Who said that? 20%. That was, you said, well, what's your name? Okay, Aaron? Errol. So Errol said 20%. That's actually closer than a lot of people that guess actually in business. So kudos. 20% is somewhat higher than the Carnegie Institute of Technology says. The Carnegie Institute of Technology says that in any technical profession, IT, consulting, finance, accounting, real estate, 15% of your success is based on your technical expertise. Now, by the way, don't anybody denigrate that and don't underestimate it. If you are not great at your technical competency, forget it. Everything else I'm about to say today is irrelevant. And there are many people who don't have a great technical competency and they fly by the seat of their pants. And if they're good at the 85%, by the way, they will be a success. But you can't do anything without a great technical base. So your degree here is brilliant and very, very important, and it's the foundation. But it doesn't differentiate you. It differentiates you to have gone to a very good school. It differentiates you definitely to have gone to William & Mary, rather than podunk you. But it's not what is going to carry you for the rest of your days. What is going to carry you for the rest of your days can be summed up in this golden triangle. And this is what I'm going to focus on. Raise your hand if you watch one of these at home. Oh, one person does. Okay, a couple of these do. You have a 1960s television with no channel changer. Is that correct? Okay, first of all, no one in this room needs a channel changer. Raise your hand if you don't have a channel changer. We do. Oh, there's a gentleman in the very back of the room. He doesn't have a channel changer. Okay, but actually, and I find it very ironic because a lot of us go to gyms and here am I, with my channel changer. Meanwhile, if I could just jump up and down from the couch, I wouldn't even need probably to go to a gym, right? We have things not because we need them, Raise your hand if your home, your parents' home, your dorm has one of these instead, right? I would say that if you could leave this room and go 1,500 miles, 1,000 miles in any direction geographically, despite the socioeconomic level, you are going to find one of these in somebody's home. Can they afford it? No. Do they need it? No. Nowadays, you can stream everything on your laptop. There is zero need for anyone to ever have a television. Of course, I have people say, what about my sports? What about my politics? You don't need a television. Why do you have a television? Why? The reason you have a television is one word. This word, I hope, changes your life. You have a television because you want one. You don't have a television because you need one. We do, and the glory of being in America, and I'm not saying this is everywhere this way in the rest of the world. In America, we have the glory and the joy of doing what we want in the pursuit of happiness. And what we want is a television. Everything you did today, everything you did this morning, everything you're wearing, your car, everything you have in your life is because you want it. And people say to me, well, no, actually, I really want to drive a Ferrari. Yes, but in your budget of what you have, you looked at other vehicles, and within that budget, you picked the car you wanted. What you're wearing right now is what you wanted to wear. And people say, no, I didn't. I'd rather be wearing my sweats or my flannel pajamas. But given that you had to come here because you wanted to, and may not even want to study, but you want to get a degree, think about the chain of want. It all goes back to something that you want. We don't have time right now, and this isn't a boot camp, and I'm going to rush through a lot of these points. The key to remember is, as I'm talking, just keep thinking, yes, what is it I want? Apply this to everything you do, and when you walk out of this room, I think you're going to find your subconscious level raised to agree about want, what other people want, what you want, what companies want, what business wants, what nations want, what corporations want, what your family is going to want, what your significant other is going to want, what your children want from you one day. Everything is going to come down to what they want and what you want, and the perfect balance to get what you want. But that's not enough. You have to understand and be able to apply, well, how do I generate it? How do I change? Whoever I am today, how do I get people to want me more, to want to hire me, for me to be a success? How do I generate that want? What can I do to achieve that want? There are 3 components to want, and I've never heard any different. And by the way, if anyone thinks of anything different before I leave, also let me know. 3 components to want, and Ken was kind enough to mention, I work with global companies around the world. Top Fortune 500 companies, also some smaller companies in Washington, D.C. I've never had any professional anywhere give me anything different than these 3 components. They're what constitute want. We're going to go over today what you can do to generate want using these 3 components. Before we get to that, I just want to mention this. When you leave here, William and Mary is actually going to say to you, they're going to hand to you a great degree, assuming that you pass everything, and basically going to say, hasta luego, and by the way, good luck building a practice, growing your career. Now, I think William and Mary actually does a much better job than a lot of organizations, schools, and I'm not saying that because I'm here, because you have this symposium. That's proof in the pudding. You have the networking tonight. That's proof in the pudding. You get an access to alumni. That's proof in the pudding. But William and Mary isn't going to be there holding your hand every day of your career. What you take from here, the content of these symposiums and the network they help deliver are there to support you. The key is going to be, what are your goals and how do you achieve your career? So I mentioned about that 85%. We need to get back to the want, but I mentioned this. That 85% is about excelling at it. And who excels at it? I can tell you right now who excels at it. I can name you the global chair of a global firm who, when he started out, he was an auditor who was good. He was as good as anybody else. Is there anyone in this room thinks that he was a better auditor than the 77,000 other people that were at the firm in the 1980s when he started? Anybody? Did they say, we've never seen anybody be able to audit like that? No, no. He's the chair of that firm because he excelled at the 85% that I call human engineering. David Maister, I'm going to mention a couple of books that I feel that you really should read at some juncture, and I'm sure you have enough to read in your classes, but I'm going to mention just a couple that I think are very important. 3 that I think are important to help you with your career like no other books. If you've never read any David Maister, he's written a plethora of books. There's only one book you need to read, and it's called Managing the Professional Service Firm. It was written in 1995, and he wrote books afterwards like The True Professional and The Trusted Advisor. But if you're going into any profession, he is a Harvard professor, and he studied accountants and lawyers. And he wrote the treatise basically on what it takes to be a trusted professional. The second book to read is Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It's a very good book, but there's a book that is way more important to read if you're going to be a professional. If you're going to be a professional in a professional service firm, I advise that you read Stephen Covey Jr.'s book, The Speed of Trust, because that book is all about trust. And last but not least, you must read Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. That book has been on the New York Times bestseller list longer than any other business book actually in history, written in 1932. But that book falls short because it just talks about something we're going to get into right now. Everybody does business with, and this is what Dale Carnegie focused on. If you can choose, everybody in business does business with, to achieve the want, somebody they, and that's what the first box is about. If you go for an interview, if they dislike you as a person, the reason that this graphically is colored differently, not that I'm a great graphics artist and that's not my forte, it's colored differently because likability is the key and the gatekeeper to a lot of things in life. The problem with Dale Carnegie's book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, which is why I recommend you read the other books too, is it's not enough. You can be really likable. For example, Ken mentioned that after this board meeting, Alex Dean had heard of me. Actually, we used to be competitors because he was with Accenture and I was with KPMG, so we were competitors, and he didn't like that many years ago. We met in the 1980s. We were competing firms, but if he hadn't liked me the times many years ago, a decade ago, 20 years ago, he met me in business, he would not in any way, shape, or form have recommended me. But think of this. There's no way, no matter how much you like someone, no matter how much he liked me, there is no way he would denigrate his brand, his reputation, nor this school by having me here today. Everything you've ever done in life that's positive is because someone somewhere liked something about you. Does everybody you ever meet like everything about you? Maybe they do, maybe they don't. You can analyze this in many different shapes and forms. You can think about the people that you meet. Do you like them? Do you not? And given that this isn't a boot camp, we don't have to go into everything to do with likability. But at the end, I'm going to give you some tactics and techniques that are tried and true and proof points that will show you about likability. Trust and respect are critical. And after this, but by the end, I'm going to go into what are the 5 C's that also establish that. What's very important to remember is that likability is not an art. It's a science. I don't want anyone in this room to think, well, you've got to be attractive and have a good sense of humor and maybe be charismatic. The people that I have seen be successful in business that people like, they're different shapes, they're different sizes, they're different genders, they're different races, they're different ages, they come from all walks of life and all religions. It's not to do with any of that whatsoever. I have seen people that you might say, how on earth is that person a success? And I would say, because they are brilliant at the 85%. They are brilliant at the engineering part, the human engineering part. If you go to see a movie, you don't walk out and say to your buddy next to you, gee, who do you think was the criminal in that movie? Somebody name me a movie that everybody's seen. Name a movie that you think everybody would have seen. And bear in mind, there are some older ones of us in the room. Name a movie that everybody in this room would have seen. The Sixth Sense, maybe. The Pulp Fiction, maybe. A movie that I often have people say Jaws. Has everybody? I know it's an old movie. Have all of you seen Jaws? Okay. So here's a good thing. Jaws is an old movie. I know. Okay. Has everybody in the room seen Jaws? Pretty much, right? So you remember the guy who wanted to keep the stores open on, they were pretending it was Martha's Vineyard, I think it was supposed to be Long Island. Remember the guy, the shopkeeper that wanted to keep the stores open? How many people walked out of that movie and thought, I really liked him, like he was really the good guy. That was the best guy in the movie. Hollywood doesn't make mistakes. You don't walk out and one person thinks, wait a second, I can't remember. And of course, this is a very old movie, The Sound of Music. When you were little, I'm sure your parents probably had you watch it. How many people walk out of The Sound of Music and say, wait a second, was Maria really going to be a good mother, or was it the governess? I thought the governess maybe was warmer and she would have been the better mother. How many people got confused as a little child? Little children are very good at watching movies and determining who is the good guy and who is the bad guy. Why do you think that is? Because they are unfiltered with all of the things that we say makes you a good guy or makes you a bad guy, right? They have this innate ability to determine that. Hollywood doesn't make mistakes. I challenge you to look at the next movie, and by the way, when you turn on the television the next time, don't put the sound on. By the way, you drive everybody else in your dorm or your friends nuts. Just watch it for a few minutes and see who you like and you don't like, and pay attention to why do you like them and why do you dislike them. Again, we don't have time to go into all the reasons why people like people or dislike people. But we all pretty much actually come out the same as to why we like people. But in professional services and for your career, it is not going to be enough. There are plenty of failed, and I hate to use this profession, so I don't want to insult anyone that's going to go into this or anybody who's parents of this profession. There's plenty of failed salesmen, plenty of failed sales insurance people that everybody likes. And they'll golf with them. They like them. They don't do business with them. One day, you're going to be banking your money with somebody, all of your money. One day, you're going to be investing your money with someone. One day, you're going to want someone, when you're successful and you're a big CFO, if you're an accounting major, you're going to be a CFO of a major company, and you're going to have somebody in, and you're going to be interviewing a major global firm, and you might meet that CFO, and you might have really liked him or her when they were here at William & Mary. But likability is not enough when we're talking about professional services. What percentage did we say it was of your success? What percentage? Anybody remember? It's 15%. So 15% is huge, and it's critical. It's not everything. Likability is key, but it's not everything. Likability is only a component of that 85%. What is really important is trust. That's when I mentioned Stephen Covey's book. Stephen Covey's book is The Speed of Trust, and I implore you to read it. Stephen Covey talks about trust being the power of your personal impact. Remember this, when you leave William & Mary, you have a great brand behind you. That's going to help you, but it isn't enough. When someone meets you, it's the power of your brand as an individual person. They're going to look at you, and whether they trust you or not is going to be up to you as a person. They're going to look in your eyes, they're going to look at your resume, they're going to interview you, and they're going to want to suss out, do they trust you as a person? So what we have to do individually is to establish trust. And last but not least, you have to garner respect. That will be based on your technical competencies. It's 15% and it's huge, and it's never to be denigrated. It's just that you can't get to it unless people like you and trust you. They just never get to that technical competency, because there's always somebody else out there with just as good of a degree and just as good a technical competency. They have the two other things. They have to like you and trust you for you to be able to differentiate yourself, to win, and to generate the want. I'm just going to give one quick example of the lack of likability. MIDA is a global company, major company in Washington, D.C., and I was given the permission to use this as an example. They do a lot of work with the government, and they had an opportunity for a major law firm to come in that was a $2 million opportunity in terms of initial legal fees. Well, if any of you are familiar with what's happening in the legal profession, there is a huge amount of downward pressure on legal fees and a lot of consolidation in that industry. Only one law firm was going to get this $2 million initial opportunity. Now that's vast for a law firm. That is huge for a law firm. These lawyers paraded in. What do you think they were? Do you think they were given for this, they interviewed, this gentleman told me, the top law firms in Washington, D.C. So the graduates, the recent graduates that came in the room, as well as the leaders, because they brought the whole prospective team in, Do you think they went to a great university, or do you think they went to Podunk U? Great, top university in Washington, in America. Law firm in Washington, D.C. Do you think they graduated at the top of their class or the bottom of their class? Top of their class, right. So we're talking about top-notch young men, young women on the team, and top-notch leaders from top-notch schools. The leader at MITRE said, Hilary, we didn't end up going with any one of those 3 top firms. We have to go to the next tier. What do you think was the word he used as to why he and his leadership team at MITRE did not pick one of the top 3 law firms in Washington, D.C.? Why? Because, yes? They didn't, it's not that they didn't trust them, no. Good try, they didn't, not that they didn't trust them. Why didn't they, and what does the gentleman here say? And what's your name? Nick. Nick, why do you think they didn't like them? What is it about lawyers sometimes that people don't like? Okay, so we have a lot of people in the room, and I don't want to insult anybody that's a lawyer. If you're looking, I mean, you're here for an MBA school, but if you want to work one day in a law firm, or at some point you're going to get your JD as well, remember this. You can have the greatest competency in the world. It doesn't mean to say somebody is going to hire you just because you have the greatest competency. If you want proof of this, Malcolm Gladwell wrote the book Blink. Did anybody read the book Blink? Is that in any of your programs? Some of the, okay. Does anybody remember what did Malcolm Gladwell say in this book about some surgeons that are highly skilled and some doctors that are sued a lot? And there's a gentleman at the back. You have to stand and shout a lot. What did he say?
So doctors were less likely to get sued for malpractice, essentially.
Exactly. And what's your name? Quinn. Okay, so Quinn, thank you so much. Yes, some doctors made a lot of mistakes and surgeons made a lot of mistakes, but this book, the whole summary of this book, and actually Quinn said it for you, so you don't have to read it now. Patients don't sue, they don't sue due to medical malpractice. Now, what I'm going to say now is for any naysayer in this room who says, I just don't think likability is that important. We're not talking, I hope, about life and death with what you're studying today or tomorrow, and that there's an issue of life or death. I don't want to denigrate what I do, what any other professional in the room does. We're not surgeons and doctors. People aren't going to die if you say the wrong thing in a meeting. We're talking now about people whose families have suffered due to medical malpractice, and Quinn shared with you that point. It was about this. Alice Birking is the leading malpractice attorney in America. And she says, doctors and surgeons simply don't sue. Patients simply don't sue doctors and surgeons they like. If you take nothing else from today, remember, if somebody dislikes you, why would they hire you? Why would they want to work with you? Why would they want to retain your firm? If they dislike you, it's going no further. But it's not enough. We're going to get on to the other points. Just make one thing that's very important to note on the slide about relationships. There was no difference with the technical information that was shared with those patients. None. They analyzed hundreds of it, and the book actually is a very good cure for insomnia because there's a lot of the study and research in this book. But it's a critical point to remember. Doctors and surgeons simply aren't sued if patients like them. Now this slide, it doesn't matter whether you like or dislike it because this is Alice Birkin's point about likability. It's the perception you create. Right now, I could have you go through this exercise, and when I do workshops, they're many hours boot camps, and we go through all the components of likability, trust and respect. This is just some highlights in this keynote today, but remember this, I'm not gonna have anybody do this. But right now, I could have asked you to close your eyes and to raise your hand about the perception of your person to the left of you at the table. Do you like them, trust them, or respect them? The reason I'm not going to do that is I don't think that would be appropriate, but let's be honest and let's face this. No, every single person in this room has made a judgment call about the person next to you. You know if you like them. You actually know if you trust and respect them at a very, very superficial, shallow level. Why? Why? That's the crux of human engineering. Your role, I believe, and to make you a greater success in life, is to get from where you are today, however likable you are, trustworthy, and how much people respect you as an individual today, If you can elevate that in any way, shape, or form, so people like, trust, and respect you better, that you can generate want better, you will achieve more in life. And by the way, you can try this in the next bar you go to, the next restaurant you go to. You can try this anywhere you ever go to get the best table, for people to remember you, everything in life. There are very few people in this world that don't want to be liked, trusted, or respected. And you can use this with other people too. Now, we only have a little amount of time, but I want to get into what are the ways, some of them at least, we're just going to touch the surface here. What are some of the ways that you can achieve likability, trust, and respect in the next email you send for a job application, the next conversation you have with an employer, and the next time that you're sitting in front of them for an interview? What could you do to be more likable, to be trusted and respected more, so that they want to hire you? So human engineering has a number of C's. There's 5 C's. What I'm going to do now quickly is to go over those. But first of all, I want to say that it extends any honeymoon you have with people. What do I mean? I don't mean the actual literal honeymoon. I mean as a metaphor. When you meet someone and you are employed in your first job, or the jobs you've already had, the first job out of here, or the jobs you've already had, there's a certain amount of time you know you're just given the benefit of the doubt. You could make a mistake, something could go wrong, it'll all be fine. They give you the benefit of the doubt. It's the honeymoon period. If you use the 5 C's and employ them, you can extend it greater. I'm going to give you one quick example. One of the firms I consult to is a major construction company, global company. One of the young engineers, I was working with the IT group because they were now installing all of the technology in all of the buildings that they had actually built. So picture this. First day the building is built, the IT team is now a profit center, meaning these are all young people just out of school like you are. And all these young people, they know now, as a profit center in a P&L, if they do a good job and they build the revenue of this group, now they'll all get bonuses. They're in your shoes. They want to get bonuses. They want to succeed. They want to do well. They install the IT infrastructure in this building. And picture yourself as a CEO. The first day that building opens, none of the email works. This young man sent me a testimonial, which is on my website, and the CIO of the company also sent me one with some other wording. And he said this: I listened to I put on the armor of the 5 C's when this CEO called me. And you can tell he's thinking like armor. I would never say that word, but like I have the vision of him going like this in his office, putting it on himself. But he said, I went down to DC and met with that CEO and his team. He took members of the team and they all employed the 5 C's. And these were his words. When we left, the CEO pulled me into his office. Now, bear in mind, email's gone down. Can you imagine? You spent now however many million, 80, 90 million on this building, all that, nothing works, no email. He thought, obviously, they'd never have any more business. And that CEO said, the way you and your team have dealt with this, I want you to manage the IT infrastructure of my 5 other buildings in the region. And the exact quote is, we thought the world was black and white, and Hilary taught us it's checkered. Well, I don't know that I would have said checkered either, but checkered, meaning it's not just does it work, does it not work? There's a gray area in the middle of everything. And that's what the 85% is about. It's about that gray area. How do you manage that when everything goes wrong? Basically, you can totally fail. If you manage the situation better than the next professional, you will prevail. You generate more want. And last but not least, this can work for anywhere. I mentioned it can work any staff you have when you ever work, or any vendor that ever you actually have reporting to you. The proof point that the 5 C's work is that it's worked across the millenniums, regardless of race, religion. The Romans did this. The Romans used this. The Greeks used this. The principles of want have always worked. Most unfortunately, we don't have the time for me to quickly show you 4 movie clips and do like I do in my boot camps, have a quiz afterwards as to what are the components that make these movies the same, because 4 of the 5 C's are based on the components that are shared in these movies. But does anybody want to guess? The top left is a very old movie. Anyone want to guess the movies and why these 4 movies have the principles in common that are the antithesis of why 4 of the C's work? Anyone know the movies? Yes? Bridge on the River Kwai. Right. Anybody know any of the other 3 ones? Thank you, Alex. Sorry, somebody said Papillon. Papillon. By the way, if you haven't seen Papillon, top right, excellent movie, French penal colony. Yes, the young man at the back there?
Bottom left is The Great Escape.
Great Escape, also, yeah, with Steve McQueen. Yes, somebody, and the very, very back, gentleman at the back? Shawshank Redemption. Correct. What do these 4 movies have in common? They're non-fictional movies, all 4 of them. What is the theme in common? Prison. They're all about incarceration. So here's my question. 4 of the C's are based on these principles because it proves they work. What you can't do is listen to something that doesn't work. The 4 C's work because they're the opposite of what incarceration does to people. There's been no prison in the world, no judge in the world, and in Greek days they didn't say, now, let's see how we should punish this young lady. Maybe we should send her out and make her do jumping jacks. They never said that. They would have thrown her in jail. That's exactly what they do today, exactly what we do, and exactly what every society does the same thing. When you're in jail and before corporal punishment, what is the next layer to punish people when you actually have them incarcerated that also was featured in all these movies? Solitary. Why do we put people in solitary? Why? And I always say, why do we put children in a timeout? Actually, in England, you just smack them. But you put them in a timeout. Why is that? Why do we do that? Why do we do that? We do it because it removes 4 of the C's of what people want. And that's why the 5 C's work. One of them we're going to get into is competence. The others are about human nature. Human engineering only works if it works across the millennium and it works for all people. They don't work if it's guesswork, and they don't work if they work with all people. Like Likeability, what Alex Birkin said, it has to be a data and it has to be statistic. If it doesn't work with everyone, then it's not worth employing. The first one is concern. If you aren't concerned genuinely with who you are talking to and who you are talking with, they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Think about this for a moment. Think about concern. Everybody in the world has just a tiny little bit of power. And if you doubt me that people want you to be concerned about them, I give you one quick test you could do. I don't think you should do it because I think it's rather horrible. I've never done it, but I think this will prove it to you. Have you ever been to a parking garage where you get a ticket to go out? You've seen a movie, you've done that. You get a parking ticket, right? And there's a person in the booth. Nowadays, there aren't always as machines. Let's just say there's a person in that booth. If you pull up to that booth, there is no law anywhere in Virginia or anywhere in the world that says you have to be polite. Wind down your window, shove the ticket in them, quick put the window up. Don't say a word. You know how long that bar probably would take to go up? You wind down the window and you say, hey, good evening, hello, how are you? Hi, smile, give them a ticket. Now, what's the difference? Are you really concerned with that person? Maybe you are, maybe you might not. I advocate every single person you ever meet, you have to be more concerned than you were when you walked in this room. Because you know what? People don't care actually about you until they know how much you care about other people. People don't like shallow people. People don't want to work with people that don't have a heart and really truthfully don't care. What's the importance of concern? Every single business, you go to their websites and they have all this stuff about our great people, about this. I look for the websites that really share real people and don't just have the photo op that looks politically correct. What about their real people? What about the ones that have people that share their actual careers? People that give an actual testimonial? Those are the people that really care about their people. Look for all the cues you can about, does the company you're going to interview with, are they really concerned about their employees? You don't want to go and work in one of those places where they call all their young recruits out of MBA schools the cannon fodder, which I've heard referred to. You want to work for a company where they're truly concerned about you. When you go for your first interview, if you demonstrate great concern about the person you're interviewing with, it'll go better. They're going to ask you some question. Ask them lots of questions about them and about their company. Show concern, demonstrate concern. Concern about what that company offers, concern about how that company originated, concern about what they offer their employees, concern about how they offer their work with their clients, and offer it genuinely. Candor. The only way to establish candor is to always be candid. I'm going to give you 3 phrases that you will hear somebody say in the middle of the sentence, and now you hear it, it's going to be your cue to, my goodness, right, that was somewhat disingenuous. 3 things to never say in the middle of any dialogue, any conversation, and don't ever use these in the middle of an interview with anybody. Quite frankly, to tell you the truth, or honestly. If you're in an interview with a prospective employer, and in the middle of that interview, you say, well, quite honestly, what are they going to think about the rest of what you just said before? People say it. People say it in the middle of what they're saying. And by the way, I'm just the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot more to drill down on. This is just giving you the high points here. But communication. There is a nation in this world that is not an oil-based nation and not a tax haven, that is the wealthiest per capita of any nation in the world because they drum this phrase into all of their children. It is buy in your language, sell in theirs. Does anybody know which that nation is? The wealthiest per capita, meaning per individual, not an oil-based nation and not a tax haven. Holland, the Netherlands. The Netherlands per capita is the wealthiest nation per capita. This phrase is a metaphor that I use for business. Now, if you go to Holland, actually you will find the Dutch. They usually speak between 5 and 7 languages because this has been drummed into their heads. But I'm using it as a metaphor for how you deal with everybody for the rest of your life. It's not the actual language. By the way, obviously languages are useful. What do I mean in terms of how you should deal with people? It's because the communication of their language isn't yours. Your language is, I get up this morning, I want this job, I'm going for this interview, and I want as much money as I can get for the greatest job, and probably, not to be mean to anybody, maybe with the best vacation, the greatest benefits, and I want the most out of this possible. What is the language of the person interviewing you that day? Their language is, they get up that morning and they say, I want to interview this graduate. I want to get the best graduate I can with the greatest background, the greatest internships, the greatest grades out of the greatest school. I've got 5 of them out of 5 MBA schools, and I just want to pay the least amount of money I possibly can for the best student I can get, right? It's a different language. Everywhere you ever go for the rest of your life, the goals of your conversation, the communication isn't about you, it's about them. What word would that mean you never use to start any sentence or any paragraph? And 100% of letters that I see from graduates that apply to either my company or apply to the companies where I've been or when I've hired people or where I've worked, they all start with this word, and it's absolutely unbelievable. If your communication is all about them, what word would you never use? Correct. Let us start out, and that's why another reason you must read Dale Carnegie, by the way. He uses an example of someone who starts a letter, and I see this every day. I am writing to you because the worst ones are the people who say, I am writing to you and my name is Joe Blogs or Susie Blogs. First of all, it's an email. I actually can see their name. Oh, I've got the email. I know it's an email. Do they think I'm an idiot? I can read it's an email. I know they're writing to me. Instead of starting out with something about the people that you're writing to, the communication about them. How about looking at your website? I was so captivated by the video that you had with the employee who just was transferred and worked for an entire year on the international exchange program you have in Stockholm, period. Your international program is so in-depth and then if your first paragraph is all about that company, what they do, one of their programs, and something that's of such fascination to you versus, I just graduated from MBA school at William & Mary and I'd like to interview with your company. I have. I'm just going to quickly give you an example of an actual letter. My son goes to a school in Washington, D.C., and somebody approached me and they wanted their their brother, to be a teacher at the school. He teaches physics in a public school in Virginia, but he lives close to this prep school in Washington, D.C. The letter started out from somebody who's a physics major who teaches physics. This is a brilliant young man, right? Way off the charts. I don't know anything about physics, much smarter than me, I'm sure. He starts out his letter and he says, I am writing to you because I'd like to teach at your school, period. This would shorten my commute because I wouldn't have to go to Virginia every day. And you laugh. This young man is really smart. Look at the next thing that you see written to you. It doesn't matter to them. Instead of starting out with saying, Having lived close to your school, I see the fine young men that you produce. The values that they come out of from your school have been appealed to me my entire life, and I've worked very hard where I'm working, but working for you and being a teacher at your school would be a great achievement, and I would value and welcome an opportunity to be interviewed by anyone at your school. Saying exactly the same content, the same brilliant young man, with a completely different angle of communication, because the communication would be about them and it was voicing concern. And by the way, that's why I add candor in there. You can't be disingenuous and you can't not tell the truth because somebody will read through it. Competence. I mentioned it before and we could spend a lot more time, but there's only 3 quick things because we have to wrap up about competence that are very important. 4 things. The most important thing to remember is it's 15% of your success, so it's very, very important. Please don't leave this presentation thinking, well, my technical degree doesn't matter, and if I walk out of here not knowing how to be a good accountant, it really doesn't matter because the other things matter. No, it is critical. What is important is that you're able to leverage it in a way that people trust you and respect you for it and also like you at the same time. So 3 things about your area of competency. Number 1, wherever you go and whatever you do, find someone in that organization that's smarter than you and better than you, and ask them and see if they'll be your mentor. Use their expertise to your benefit and become the smartest person wherever you go as to what's going on at that company. Secondly, you have to know what's going on in industry, and wherever you go for the rest of your lives, the rest of your careers, I advocate you must always know what's happening in the industry in general. And last but not least, know about your competitors. Know what they're doing. If you're going to be going into an interview from this MBA school, you also need to know what were the competitor MBA programs? What will those students be saying? How are they going to be differentiating themselves? You need to know. Just remember how important competence is, but it's the way you position it. And last but not least, connection is key. Looking around this room, it is joyous to see that the world is so diverse. That's the good news. The bad news is you have to get along with absolutely everybody else, and you have to connect with them if they're completely different from you. You might go to work for somebody who's a completely different race than you, different gender, different religion, completely different age. You might be reporting to them, but you've got to connect with them so that you get along brilliantly. How do you connect with them? I usually do an entire workshop on connection. I'm going to leave you with one quick thought. And I hope you do read Dale Carnegie's book. Dale Carnegie talked about people's names and the quickest way to connect with people. When you leave here and the next time you're in a car, actually don't be looking at the buildings, it should be when somebody else drives, but look at the buildings and think about this. Why is Hilton called Hilton? Why is Sheraton called Sheraton? Why is PwC called PwC, Mr. Price, Mr. Waterhouse, and the Coopers? Why is any firm named what it is? Why? Why do they have their name on that firm? Why does every institution of higher education, when someone gives millions of dollars, what is the name of this school? Mr. Mason didn't say, oh, I'd rather you call it the Joe Bloggs School. That would be a lot better for me. He gave millions. He wanted his name on this building, right? And I have a test for you. Look at every building, every firm, and every company, and you'll see what I mean about people's names and the power of those names. But remember this. If you go back to your dorm, or the next time with your significant other, boyfriend, girlfriend, in your dorm, and you go to your best friend, and you call them by a different name, what do you think they're going to think? You didn't remember their name. People's names are absolutely critical to them, and it's a tiny, minuscule little component of connection. I don't have time to go into all the other things. All the many, many components. I tried to give you the high points of the 5 C's. That's all I could give you today. I hope that you can take some sense of the difference between need and want. People may need an employee, but why on earth would they want you? Generating want is in your hands to generate the want yourself, to make people like you, trust you, and respect you. If they don't like you, if they dislike you, and they don't trust you, and they don't respect you, you won't be hired and you won't be promoted. I hope this has helped. Thank you for having me.